Don't touch me. Lydia's voice cracked as Rhett Calder reached for her hand at the altar, and the entire church went silent. Blood still dripped from his knuckles, someone else's blood, and her father had just signed papers selling her like livestock to pay his debts. The preacher stammered through vows while Rhett stood there. This man, everyone whispered, had killed 17 people. This cowboy so dangerous that grown men crossed the street to avoid him. But when he finally looked at her, Lydia's breath stopped, because she didn't see the monster everyone feared. She saw agony so raw it made her own terror feel small. Saw a man as trapped as she was, and somehow that was worse than any violence could ever be. Before we begin, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to our channel and stay with this story until the very end. Please comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ride to the ranch took 3 hours, and Rhett didn't speak once. Lydia sat in the wagon beside him, clutching the small bag that held everything she'd been allowed to take from her father's house. The sky stretched wide and empty above them, and the road carved through land so desolate it felt like God had forgotten it existed. She kept her eyes forward, fighting the urge to look at the man beside her, the man who was now her husband. "You scared of me?" His voice startled her. Lydia turned, found him still looking straight ahead, hands steady on the reins. "I'd be foolish not to be," she said carefully. "That's honest." Something that might have been approval crossed his face. "I can work with honest." "What can't you work with?" "Lies, betrayal, people who smile while they're planning to put a knife in your back." He glanced at her then, and the directness of his gaze made her breath catch. "You plan on doing any of that?" "I plan on surviving," Lydia said. "That's all I've ever planned." Rhett's jaw tightened and he looked away. "Then we've got that in common." They rode in silence after that, but something had shifted. The fear was still there, would probably always be there, but underneath it, Lydia felt something else. Curiosity maybe, or recognition. Like looking into a mirror and seeing someone who'd learned the same hard lessons about the world. The ranch appeared as the sun started dropping toward the horizon. It wasn't what Lydia had expected. No sprawling mansion, no obvious displays of wealth. Just a sturdy house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals that stretched into the distance. Modest, almost. Except for the men. There were at least a dozen of them scattered around the property, and every single one stopped what they were doing when the wagon rolled through the gates. Stopped and stared. Not at Rhett, at her. "They know about me?" Lydia asked quietly. "They know I got married today. They know you're not to be bothered, questioned, or approached without permission." Rhett brought the wagon to a halt in front of the house. "They know if anyone breaks those rules, they'll answer to me." He climbed down, then turned and offered her his hand. Lydia hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was firm but not crushing, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. A woman emerged from the house, older, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that assessed Lydia in 3 seconds flat. "This is May," Rhett said. "She runs the house. You need anything, you ask her." "Ma'am," May said with a brief nod. Her voice was kind, but measured. "I've got a room ready for you. Mr. Calder thought you might want to rest after the journey." "A room?" Lydia looked at Rhett. "Just one." "You'll have your own space," he said flatly. "I don't force myself on women. Not for any reason." The bluntness of it caught her off guard. Before Lydia could respond, Rhett was already walking away, heading toward the barn with long, purposeful strides. May cleared her throat. "He's not much for explaining himself. Come on, I'll show you around." The house was clean, well-maintained, and surprisingly comfortable. May led her upstairs to a bedroom that faced east morning light, she explained, because Mr. Calder had specifically requested it. The room had a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a door that locked from the inside. "He insisted on that," May said, nodding toward the lock. "Said you should feel safe." Lydia ran her fingers over the brass mechanism. "Does he always think of things like that?" "Mr. Calder thinks of everything." May moved to the window, drew the curtains back. "He's particular about how things are done here. You'll learn soon enough. What else should I know? May turned, and for the first time something warm entered her expression. That you're safer here than you probably were wherever you came from. And that if Mr. Calder says he won't hurt you, he means it. That man doesn't waste words on lies. After May left, Lydia sat on the edge of the bed and let herself shake. The fear she'd been holding back since this morning, since her father had told her she was being married off to settle his gambling debts, finally broke through. She pressed her hands against her face and tried to breathe. A knock on the door made her jump. "It's May. I've got water for washing and supper's in an hour." Lydia opened the door, accepted the pitcher and basin. "Will he be there at supper?" "Mr. Calder takes his meals in his study. He said you should eat with me and the house staff until you're comfortable." "Comfortable?" Lydia repeated. "Does that happen often? People getting comfortable here?" May smiled, a real smile this time. "More often than you'd think. Give it time, Mrs. Calder." Mrs. Calder. The name felt foreign, like clothing that didn't fit. Lydia washed her face, and hands changed into a clean dress, and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. Supper was quiet. May introduced her to Rosa the cook, and to a young man named Daniel, who helped with the house and the horses. Both were polite, respectful, and careful not to ask questions. Lydia ate mechanically, tasting nothing, and excused herself as soon as she could. She was halfway up the stairs when she heard voices, low, angry, coming from somewhere down the hall. Rhett's voice and another man's. Lydia knew she shouldn't listen. Knew it was dangerous to be curious about a man like Rhett Calder. But she moved toward the sound anyway, stopping outside a partially open door. "You can't keep doing this," the other man was saying. His voice was rough, older. "You bring in every stray that crosses your path, you're going to draw attention we can't afford." "I don't remember asking for your opinion, Frank. I'm your foreman. It's my job to give you my opinion, and it's my job to decide what happens on my land." Rhett's tone was ice. "The girl stays. They all stay. End of discussion." "What girl? We talking about your new wife or the one you pulled out of Voss's place last week?" Silence. Then both. "Jesus, Rhett. Voss was beating her half to death. You expect me to leave her there? I expect you to stop painting a target on your back." Frank's voice rose. "Duncan Voss doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive. And now you've got a wife he could use against you. Then it's my problem to handle, not yours." Footsteps. Lydia backed away from the door, but not fast enough. It swung open, and Rhett stood there, his eyes finding hers immediately. "How much did you hear?" There was no point in lying. "Enough." Frank appeared behind him, weathered face, suspicious eyes. He looked Lydia up and down, then shook his head. "This is a mistake." "Frank." Just the one word, but it carried weight. Frank's jaw clenched, and he left without another word. Rhett stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind him. "You should be in your room." "I heard arguing. I got worried." "Worried about what?" "That you might—" Lydia stopped. "I don't know. That something was wrong. Something's always wrong." He leaned against the wall, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. "You'll learn that fast enough." "Who's Duncan Voss?" Rhett's expression went cold. "No one you need to worry about." "If Frank's right, if Voss could use me against you—" "Frank talks too much." Rhett pushed off the wall, started to walk past her, then paused. "The locked room May mentioned. The one you're not supposed to enter." "What about it?" "It's at the end of this hall. Stay away from it. Not because I'm controlling you, because it's the one place on this ranch that isn't safe." "Why keep it if it's not safe?" Something dark crossed his face. "Because some things need to be locked away. Doesn't mean they stop existing." He left her standing there, and Lydia watched him disappear down the stairs. Then she turned and looked down the hallway. At the end, barely visible in the dim light, was a door with a heavy padlock. She went to bed that night with more questions than answers. The first week passed in a strange blur. Lydia woke early, helped May with the house, learned the routines of the ranch. She saw Rhett in passing, always busy, always moving, always surrounded by men who looked at him like he was simultaneously their salvation and their executioner. He never came to her room, never asked anything of her, barely spoke to her except in brief, formal exchanges. "You settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you." "You need anything, tell May." "I will." And that would be it. He'd nod and walk away, leaving Lydia more confused than ever. But she watched him, couldn't help it. Watched how he moved through the ranch with absolute authority, how his men jumped at his commands, how even the horses seemed to settle when he was near. Watched how he'd spend hours in that locked study, emerging with blood on his knuckles and exhaustion carved into his face. And she watched what happened with the people who arrived. The first was a woman young, terrified with bruises painting her arms purple and yellow. Rhett brought her to May, spoke in low tones, and by evening the woman had a room and a job helping in the kitchen. The second was a boy couldn't have been more than 16, rail-thin and jumpy as a spooked colt. Rhett put him to work in the stables, made sure he ate 3 meals a day, and Lydia saw the kid start to fill out within days. The third was an older man with a limp and rope burns on his wrists. Rhett gave him a place in the bunkhouse and a job mending fences. None of them ever said where they'd come from. None of them had to. "He collects broken things," Rosa told Lydia one afternoon while they were preparing vegetables. "Always has. Can't stand seeing people suffer." "Then why does everyone fear him?" Rosa's knife paused mid-cut. "Because the people he protects are the same ones other folks want to hurt, and Mr. Calder doesn't let anyone hurt what's his, not without paying for it." That night, Lydia finally found the courage to knock on Rhett's study door. "Come in." He was sitting at his desk, papers spread in front of him, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe? "I need to understand something," Lydia said. "All right. Why did you marry me? My father said it was about a debt, but you don't seem like a man who needs money." Rhett leaned back in his chair. "I don't." "Then why?" "Your father owed money to some dangerous people. They were going to take you as payment, sell you to a brothel in the next territory." He said it plainly without emotion. "I offered him a different deal. Marry you to me, debts forgiven, you stay safe." The room tilted. Lydia gripped the back of a chair. You bought me to save me." "I bought you to keep you from something worse." He picked up his glass, took a slow drink. "Don't make me into a hero. I'm not." "Then what are you?" "Practical." He met her eyes. "And tired of watching people get destroyed by bastards who think power gives them the right to take whatever they want." Lydia's throat tightened. "Is that what happened to you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Rhett's face went carefully blank. "Get some sleep, Lydia. You look tired." It was a dismissal clear as day, but as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "The things people say about me, most of them are true. I've killed men, hurt people who probably deserved it, and some who maybe didn't. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not." He paused. "But I meant what I said at the altar. I won't hurt you, and I won't let anyone else hurt you either. Even if it puts you in danger." His smile was bitter. "I've been in danger my whole life. One more threat doesn't make much difference." 2 weeks in, everything changed. Lydia was in the kitchen with May when they heard the horses, too many moving too fast. May's face went pale. "Get upstairs. Lock your door. Don't come out until Mr. Calder or I come get you." "What's happening?" "Now, Lydia." She ran, took the stairs 2 at a time, heard shouting from outside, the sound of men gathering. She made it to her room, locked the door, and moved to the window. 8 riders had surrounded the house, and at the front on a black stallion sat a man who radiated violence like heat from a fire. Duncan Voss. He was older than Rhett, maybe 40, with silver threading his dark hair and a smile that made Lydia's skin crawl. When Rhett emerged from the house, Voss's smile widened. "Calder heard you got yourself a wife. Thought I'd come pay my respects." "You're not welcome here, Voss. Leave." Now that's no way to treat a neighbor. Voss's eyes scanned the property, landed on the window where Lydia stood. She froze. Pretty little thing. Where'd you find her? Rhett stepped forward, and every man on the ranch moved with him. I'm going to say this once. Turn around and ride out, or I'll put you in the ground. Voss laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You took something from me, Calder. That girl you pulled from my ranch, she was mine. I paid for her. You were killing her. She was property. I can do what I want with my property. Voss's voice turned cold. Just like you can do what you want with yours. That pretty wife up there in the window, she your property too. Rhett's hand dropped to his gun. Every man behind him did the same. The world held its breath. Then Voss raised his hand, still smiling. Easy. I just came to talk, to make things clear. He looked directly at the window again, directly at Lydia. You've made yourself some powerful enemies, Calder. And enemies tend to go after what you love. You might want to think about that. He wheeled his horse around and his men followed. Within moments they were gone, leaving dust and threat hanging in the air. Lydia stepped back from the window, her heart hammering. A knock on her door made her jump. Lydia, it's Rhett. Open up. She unlocked the door with shaking hands. Rhett stood there, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real fear in his eyes. Did he see you? Yes. Rhett swore, turned, paced 3 steps and back. This changes things. What things? He looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. You were supposed to be safe here. That was the whole point. But now, Voss knows about, you knows where you are. I'm not leaving. The words surprised them both. Rhett stopped pacing. What? You said I was safer here than anywhere else. Was that true? Yes, but then I'm staying. Lydia squared her shoulders. You protected me when you didn't have to. You've protected everyone here. I'm not going to run the first time someone threatens that. Rhett stared at her like he'd never seen her before. You don't know what you're saying. Voss is dangerous. So are you. She held his gaze. Everyone says so. They say you're the most dangerous man in the territory. So why should I be afraid of him when I have you? The silence stretched. Then Rhett did something she'd never seen him do before. He smiled. Really smiled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. Yeah. His smile faded, but something warm remained in his eyes. Maybe both. He started to leave, then turned back. There's going to be trouble. Real trouble. Voss doesn't make threats, he makes promises. And I need to know you can handle what's coming. I've been handling things my whole life, Lydia said quietly. I'll handle this too. Rhett nodded slowly. Then I need you to understand something. The locked room, the one I told you to stay away from, it's not locked to keep you out. It's locked to keep what's inside from getting out. What's inside? Everything I've tried to bury. Every violent thing I've ever done. Every person I've had to become to survive. I keep it locked away because if I don't... He stopped. It's the part of me that scares even me. Lydia's throat went dry. Why are you telling me this? Because Voss is going to force that door open. And when he does, you're going to see who I really am. His voice dropped. And I need to know if you can live with that. She thought about the woman with bruises. The boy who'd been starving. The old man with rope burns. All the people Rhett had saved without asking for anything in return. And she thought about the fear in his eyes when Voss had looked at her, not fear for himself, but fear for her. I've already seen who you really are, Lydia said. You just don't believe it yourself yet. Rhett looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked away, and Lydia heard him calling orders to his men, organizing defenses, preparing for war. And she knew with absolute certainty that everything was about to change. The change came in the form of guards. By dawn, Rhett had positioned men at every corner of the property, armed, watchful, rotating in shifts that never left a gap. Lydia woke to the sound of boots on the porch, voices calling out positions, the metallic click of rifles being checked and rechecked. She dressed quickly and found May already in the kitchen, her face tight with worry. He's been up all night, May said without preamble. Planning, organizing. Won't eat, won't rest. Where is he now? The barn. But Lydia... May caught her arm. Let him work. When he gets like this, the best thing you can do is stay out of his way. Lydia pulled free gently. I'm not afraid of him. Maybe you should be. Just a little. But Lydia was already moving, crossing the yard toward the barn. Men nodded as she passed, their eyes tracking her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She found Rhett in the tack room, surrounded by weapons rifles lined against the wall, pistols laid out on a workbench, ammunition boxes stacked like building blocks. You shouldn't be out here, he said without looking up. May said you haven't slept. I've got work to do. You've got men to do the work. You need rest. Finally, he looked at her, and the exhaustion carved into his face made her chest ache. Rest is a luxury. Voss won't wait for me to be well rested before he makes his move. Then let me help. Help? How? His tone wasn't cruel, just weary. You know how to shoot, how to organize a defense, how to predict where a man like Voss will strike first. No, Lydia admitted. But I know how to manage a household. I know how to keep people fed and organized. I know how to free up your men so they can focus on what they do best. She stepped closer. Let me do what I'm good at so you can do what you're good at. Rhett studied her for a long moment. Then he set down the pistol he'd been cleaning. You want to help, fine, but you do exactly what I tell you when I tell you. No arguments, no questions. Understood. Understood. May's too old to be running the whole house alone, especially with the extra men we've got now. Take over the cooking rotation, the supply inventory, the sleeping arrangements. Make sure everyone eats, everyone has what they need. He paused. And keep the new arrivals calm. They're already scared. They don't need to see panic from the people who are supposed to be in charge. The new arrivals. 2 more came in last night while you were sleeping. A woman and her daughter. Voss's men were hunting them. His jaw tightened. I'm not turning people away just because he's making threats. Lydia felt something warm and fierce unfurl in her chest. I'll take care of them. She spent the next 3 days doing exactly that. Took over the kitchen with Rosa's help, organized meal schedules that fed 30 people 3 times a day, inventoried supplies, and made lists of what they'd need if they ended up under siege. She met the woman and her daughter Emma and Sarah, both pale and hollow-eyed, and gave them a room near hers, made sure they understood they were safe now. Is it true? Emma asked on the second night, her voice barely a whisper. That Mr. Calder killed 3 of Voss's men to get us out. I don't know, Lydia said honestly, but I know he brought you here, and I know he won't let Voss take you back. Sarah, who couldn't have been more than 8, looked up with eyes too old for her face. Is Mr. Calder scary? Lydia thought about that. Yes, but not to people who need protection. What about to people who hurt others? Especially to them. Sarah nodded solemnly, as if that made perfect sense. And maybe it did. Lydia saw Rhett in passing, always moving, always working, always carrying the weight of everyone's safety on his shoulders. She'd bring him food, and he'd eat it mechanically, barely tasting. She'd tell him about the household, and he'd nod his mind already 3 steps ahead, planning for threats she couldn't see. But on the 4th night, something shifted. She brought dinner to his study, and found him staring at the locked door at the end of the hall. Just staring, his hand resting on his gun, like he expected it to burst open at any moment. Rhett! He flinched, actually flinched, and turned. Sorry, I thought you were... He stopped. Never mind. Who did you think I was? No one. It's nothing. But his hand stayed on the gun. Lydia set the tray down. What's in that room? I told you. Things that need to stay locked away. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. He moved past her, headed for his study. Eat something. You've been running yourself ragged. So have you. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. He stopped, turned back. What do you want from me, Lydia? The question caught her off guard. I don't. I'm not asking for anything. Everyone wants something. Your father wanted money. Voss wants revenge. My men want safety. What about you? His eyes were too sharp, too knowing. What do you want? The truth came out before she could stop it. I want to understand you. Silence. Then Rhett laughed a harsh, bitter sound. No, you don't. Trust me. You keep saying that. Keep pushing me away. But you married me to save me. You've given me freedom I never had before, and you're protecting people who have nowhere else to go. Her voice rose. So yes, I want to understand why a man everyone calls a monster is the only person I've ever met who actually acts like he cares whether people live or die. Rhett's face went very still. You want to know why? Yes. Because I know what it's like. The words came out flat, emotionless. I know what it's like to be helpless. To have someone with power decide your life doesn't matter. To beg for mercy and get nothing but pain. He took a step toward her. I was 12 when my father sold me to pay his debts. 12 years old, and the man who bought me... He stopped. I spent 6 years learning exactly how creative people can be with cruelty. And when I finally got free, I made myself a promise. I'd never be helpless again. And I'd never let anyone else be helpless if I could stop it. Lydia's throat closed. Rhett, that's what's in this locked room. Everything I did to survive those 6 years. Every person I had to hurt. Every line I had to cross. Every piece of myself I had to destroy to become someone who couldn't be destroyed. His voice dropped. You want to understand me. That's what you need to understand. I'm not protecting these people because I'm good. I'm doing it because I remember being them. And I remember praying someone would come save me. His smile was broken. No one ever did. Lydia couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All she could do was stand there while everything she thought she knew about this man rearranged itself into something far more complex and painful. That's why you won't touch me, she said finally. Why you keep your distance. I told you, I don't force myself on women. But it's more than that. You're afraid... She stopped, understanding flooding through her. You're afraid of becoming him, the man who bought you. Rhett turned away. Get some rest, Lydia. No. She moved in front of him, forced him to look at her. You saved me from being sold. You saved Emma and her daughter. You saved that boy in the stables and the woman in the kitchen and everyone else who's found their way here. You are nothing like the man who hurt you. You don't know what I'm capable of. Yes, I do. You're capable of violence when it's necessary, of protecting people who need it, of carrying weight that would crush most men. She held his gaze. But you're also capable of giving me a room with a lock on the inside, of making sure I have choices, of treating me like a person instead of property. Lydia, he taught you how to survive, but he didn't teach you how to be cruel. You learned that yourself, and you chose to use it to protect instead of destroy. Her voice cracked. Don't you see? You're not him. You never were. Rhett's expression broke. For just a moment, she saw everything, the pain, the guilt, the desperate hope that maybe she was right. Then he locked it away, his face going carefully blank. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Why? What's happening tomorrow? Voss sent word. He wants to meet. Talk terms. Lydia's blood went cold. You're not going. I have to. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. Rhett's smile was grim. But if I don't go, he'll assume I'm weak, that I'm afraid. And weak men don't survive out here. So you're just going to walk into an ambush. I'm going to walk into a negotiation with enough armed men to make sure it stays a negotiation. He touched her shoulder briefly the first time he'd initiated contact since their wedding. Don't worry. I've survived worse. But Lydia did worry. Worried through a sleepless night, worried through the morning as she watched Rhett ride out with Frank and 6 heavily armed men. Worried as the hours dragged past and the sun climbed higher and still they didn't return. May found her pacing the kitchen. He'll come back. He always does. What if this time is different? Then we do what he'd want us to do. We protect the people here, we hold the ranch, and we don't give Voss the satisfaction of seeing us break. Lydia wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that Rhett was invincible, that nothing could touch him. But she'd seen his face last night, seen the pain he carried like a physical weight, and she knew the truth. Everyone could be broken. Even Rhett Calder. The men returned at sunset. Lydia heard the horses before she saw them, and relief flooded through her, so strong it made her knees weak. She ran outside, counted heads, everyone accounted for, no one bleeding, and then she saw Rhett's face. Something had happened, something bad. He dismounted, gave brief orders to his men, then turned to find her watching. Inside, now. His tone left no room for argument. Lydia followed him to his study, her heart hammering. The door had barely closed before she was talking. What happened? Voss made his terms clear. Rhett poured himself a drink, downed it in one swallow. He wants the people I've taken from him. All of them. Emma, Sarah, the boy, the old man, everyone. And he wants them by the end of the week. And if you refuse, he'll take them by force, along with everything else I've built here. Rhett poured another drink. He's got 50 men now, maybe more. He's been recruiting, preparing. This isn't just about getting his property back, it's about making an example out of me. So what do? We? He looked at her. There's no we in this, Lydia. This is my fight. The hell it is. She crossed her arms. I'm your wife. This ranch is my home now. These people, I've been taking care of them, feeding them, making sure they feel safe. You don't get to cut me out just because things are getting dangerous. That's exactly why I'm cutting you out. Because things are about to get very dangerous and I can't... He stopped. I can't protect everyone. Not against those numbers. The admission cost him. Lydia could see it in every line of his body, the way he held himself like he was bracing for a blow. Then we need to be smart, she said. What are our options? Rhett stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly something like respect entered his eyes. We can give him what he wants. Send the people away. Hope he's satisfied with that. He won't be. No, he won't. Rhett set down his glass. We can run. Pack up, take everyone, head for the next territory and start over. You'd give up everything you've built. I've started over before. I can do it again. Or, because she could see there was an or in his eyes. Or we fight. Make a stand here with what we have and hope we're strong enough to survive it. He moved closer. But if we do that, people are going to die. Maybe people we care about. Maybe... His voice dropped. Maybe you. I'm not leaving, Lydia said firmly. And I don't think those people out there want to leave either. They came here because you offered them something no one else would. Safety, dignity, a chance to live without fear. She held his gaze. You take that stand, they'll stand with you. They'll die with me. Maybe. Or maybe they'll live because you taught them how to fight back. She stepped closer. You said you remember praying someone would save you. Well, you saved them. Now let them return the favor. Rhett's jaw worked. You have no idea what you're asking. Yes, I do. I'm asking you to trust that the people you've protected might be strong enough to protect you back. The silence stretched. Then Rhett turned away, braced his hands on the desk. If we do this, if we make this stand, there's no going back. Voss won't stop until one of us is dead. Then we make sure it's him. He laughed sharp and humorless. You think it's that simple? No. I think it's going to be the hardest thing any of us have ever done. But I also think... She paused. I think you've spent your whole life fighting alone. Maybe it's time to let other people fight with you. Rhett looked at her over his shoulder and something in his expression shifted. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone grateful to be saved, someone who'd do what she was told and not ask questions. His mouth quirked. Someone easier. Sorry to disappoint. You haven't. The words were quiet, almost reluctant. You haven't disappointed at all. Before Lydia could respond, Frank burst through the door without knocking. We've got a problem. Rhett straightened. What kind of problem? 3 of Voss's men just rode up to the east fence. They're not attacking, just sitting there. Watching. How long? 20 minutes and counting. Rhett's face went hard. He's testing our defenses, seeing how we respond where we position our men. He grabbed his gun belt. Double the guards on that side, but don't engage. I want to know the second they move. Frank nodded and left. Rhett started to follow, then turned back to Lydia. Stay in the house. Lock your door. And if shooting starts, I know. Hide and don't come out until it's safe. No. He crossed back to his desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a small pistol. If shooting starts, you defend yourself. This is loaded, safety's here. He demonstrated. You point, you shoot, you don't hesitate. Understand? Lydia took the gun with shaking hands. I know. But if it comes down to your life or someone else's, you pull that trigger. His eyes were fierce. Promise me. I promise. He nodded once, then left. And Lydia stood there holding a gun she'd never wanted in a life she'd never chosen, preparing for a war she didn't understand. But as she looked out the window at the ranch, at the people working, despite the danger at the home Rhett had built from broken pieces, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't running, and she wasn't hiding. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing. The watchers stayed until midnight, then disappeared like ghosts. But everyone knew what it meant. The testing phase was over. The real attack would come soon. It came 3 days later at dawn, when the world was still caught between darkness and light. Lydia woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs, followed by shouting men's voices, rough and unfamiliar. She grabbed the pistol Rhett had given her and ran to her door, pressed her ear against it. More shouting. The crack of gunfire. May screaming. She unlocked the door and stepped into chaos. Smoke filled the hallway, acrid and choking. 2 men she didn't recognize were dragging Emma down the stairs, the woman fighting like a wild thing, while Sarah's screams echoed from somewhere below. Lydia raised the pistol with shaking hands. Let her go! The men turned. One of them laughed. Well, look what we got here. The new Mrs. Calder trying to play hero. I said let her go. Or what? You gonna shoot us? He took a step toward her. You even know how to use that thing, sweetheart? Lydia pulled the trigger. The recoil knocked her back against the wall, her ears ringing from the blast. The man went down hard, clutching his shoulder, and his partner dropped Emma and reached for his own gun. But Emma was faster, grabbed a heavy candlestick from the hall table, and brought it down on his head with a sickening crack. Get Sarah! Emma gasped. They have her in the kitchen. More gunfire erupted from outside, closer now. Lydia helped Emma to her feet, and they ran stumbling through smoke and noise toward the back of the house. They found Sarah huddled under the kitchen table, Rosa standing over her with a cast-iron skillet raised like a weapon. Thank God, Rosa breathed. I heard the shooting, thought they'd gotten to you. Where's May? Cellar. She took the others down there when the attack started. Rosa's face was pale but determined. Mr. Calder's outside with the men. It's bad, Lydia. Real bad. A window exploded, inward glass spraying across the floor. Lydia shoved Emma and Sarah toward the cellar door. Go, now. Get everyone down there and don't come up until... The front door slammed open, and boots thundered through the house. Male voices calling out to each other, searching. Lydia raised her pistol again, but Rosa caught her arm. There's too many. We have to hide. They made it to the cellar just as the kitchen door burst open. Lydia pulled it shut behind them and threw the bolt, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. In the darkness below, she could hear crying, whispered prayers, the sound of people trying not to breathe too loud. Lydia. May's voice shaking but steady. Is that you? It's me. Emma and Sarah are here, Rosa too. We're safe for now. For now, May repeated. But they'll find us eventually. She was right. Above them, boots stomped across the kitchen floor. Someone tried the cellar door, rattled it hard. They're down here, a man shouted. Get the crowbar, we'll break it open. Lydia positioned herself at the bottom of the stairs, pistol raised. Behind her, she heard Emma praying, Sarah sobbing, the others pressed against the far wall. If they came through that door, she'd have one shot. Maybe two. After that, the door shuddered under a heavy blow, then another. The wood began to splinter. Then suddenly the pounding stopped. Shouting from above, different now panicked, urgent. Running footsteps. And a voice that made Lydia's blood freeze. Rhett's voice. Not calling orders or organizing defense. Roaring with pure, unleashed rage. The sounds that followed were worse than gunfire. Worse than screaming. The wet impact of fists on flesh. The crack of bones breaking, a man begging for mercy and receiving none. It went on, and Lydia stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, the pistol trembling in her hands. Then silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Lydia. Rhett's voice through the door, rough and raw. It's me. Open up. She climbed the stairs on shaking legs, threw back the bolt. The door swung open, and Rhett stood there, and Lydia's breath caught. Blood covered him, his hands, his shirt, his face. Not his blood. His eyes were wild, unfocused, and for a moment she saw exactly what he'd warned her about. The thing he kept locked away. The violence he was capable of when all restraint was stripped away. Are you hurt? His voice was hoarse. Did they touch you? I'm fine. We're all fine. He sagged against the doorframe, and the wildness in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something that looked like relief. I heard the shot. Thought... He stopped. Thought I was too late. I shot one of them. He was trying to... Lydia's voice cracked. Emma's safe. Sarah's safe. We're all safe because you... Don't. He held up a blood-stained hand. Don't make me into something I'm not. But before she could respond, Frank appeared behind him, his face grim. Rhett, we've got a problem. What kind of problem? The kind where Voss is at the front gate with 30 men asking to talk terms. Frank's jaw tightened. And he's got Daniel. Lydia's stomach dropped. Daniel, the young man who worked in the stables, who'd been skin and bones when Rhett brought him in, who'd finally started smiling again after weeks of safety. Rhett's expression went very cold. What does he want? He wants you. Says if you come out and talk like civilized men, he'll let the boy go unharmed. Frank paused. Says if you don't, he'll start cutting pieces off him until you change your mind. The silence that followed was worse than any violence. Then Rhett turned to Lydia. Get everyone back in the cellar. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe. No. The word came out before she could stop it. You can't go out there. It's suicide. He's got one of my people, so you're just going to walk out there and let him kill you instead. Better me than Daniel. That boy's been through enough. Rhett started to move past her, but Lydia grabbed his arm. There has to be another way. There isn't. He pulled free, but gently. This was always going to end with me and Voss. Better to get it over with. Rhett, please. He looked at her, then really looked at her, and something in his expression made her throat close. I need you to do something for me. What? If I don't make it back, if Voss wins this, I need you to take everyone and run. There's money hidden in my study behind the third bookshelf. Enough to get you all to the next territory and start over. His voice dropped. Promise me you'll take care of them. I'm not promising anything because you're not dying today. Lydia's hands fisted in his shirt, blood and all. You hear me? You don't get to save me just to throw your life away 3 weeks later. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. You're something else, you know that. I'm your wife, and I'm telling you there has to be another way. There isn't. Yes, there is. The voice came from behind them. Emma climbing up from the cellar, her face set with determination. Let me go. What? Rhett stared at her. No, absolutely not. He wants someone from your ranch. Give him someone. Give him me. Emma's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. I was his property before. I can go back, distract him long enough for you to... No one's going back to that bastard, Rhett said flatly. Especially not you. Then what's your plan? Walk out there and get yourself killed. What happens to the rest of us then? Emma moved closer. You saved my life, Mr. Calder. Now let me save yours. I said no. And I'm saying you don't get to decide this alone anymore. Emma's voice rose. You've spent all this time protecting us, giving us choices, treating us like we matter. So treat me like I matter now. Let me choose. Rhett looked like he'd been punched. He turned to Frank to Lydia, searching for support. Found none. There's another option, Frank said carefully. We could use her as bait. Send her out, make Voss think we're surrendering. But have men positioned ready to strike when his guard is down. That puts her directly in danger. We're already in danger, Emma interrupted. All of us. This just gives us a fighting chance. Lydia watched emotions war across Rhett's face, the need to protect the responsibility. He felt the terrible weight of making decisions that could cost lives. She'd seen him violent, seen him cold, seen him vulnerable. But she'd never seen him like this, truly torn. Rhett, she said quietly. Let her choose. His eyes met hers, and she saw the moment he broke. Saw the careful control he'd maintained for years finally crack under the weight of caring too much about too many people. Fine, he said roughly. But we do this my way. Emma goes out, trades herself for Daniel. The second the boys clear, my men open fire. We take down as many of Voss's men as we can before they scatter. He looked at Frank. Position sharpshooters on the roof in the barn loft behind the water trough. I want crossfire from 3 directions. Frank nodded and left. Rhett turned to Emma. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Her voice was soft but firm. You gave me my life back, Mr. Calder. If I can help you keep yours, that's a debt I'm happy to pay. 20 minutes later, Lydia watched from an upstairs window as Emma walked across the yard toward the gate. Voss sat on his horse at the front of his men, Daniel kneeling at his feet with a rope around his neck. Even from a distance, Lydia could see the boy shaking. Let him go, Emma called out. I'm here. You can have me. Just let the boy go. Voss's laugh carried across the yard. Well, well, look who finally came to her senses. He yanked Daniel to his feet. You think I'm stupid enough to make a straight trade? I take you back. I still have to deal with Calder. No. He pulled a gun, pressed it to Daniel's head. Tell Calder to come out here himself, unarmed, hands where I can see them. He does that, I let both of you go. Emma stood frozen. He won't. Then the boy dies. Voss cocked the gun. You've got 10 seconds to convince your savior to be a hero. No, wait, please. 10, 9, 8. Lydia's hands gripped the windowsill hard enough to hurt. She could see Rhett's men in position on the roof in the barn, crouched behind cover. Could see the impossible calculation playing out. If they opened fire now, Daniel would die. If they waited, Rhett would have to expose himself. 7, 6, 5. Then Rhett stepped out of the house, hands raised, walking slowly toward the gate. Every step deliberate, every movement screaming that he knew this was a trap and was walking into it anyway. Rhett, no! Emma's voice cracked. Go back, it's not worth it. But he kept walking, reached the gate, stopped 10 feet from Voss. I'm here, let them go. Voss's smile was vicious. You know I've been waiting for this moment. Years of you acting like you're better than everyone else. Like you're some kind of avenging angel saving all the broken little birds. He gestured at Daniel, at Emma. When really you're just a scared kid playing dress-up, pretending you're strong when we both know the truth. You want to talk about the truth? Rhett's voice was ice. Let's talk about how you buy people because you're too pathetic to earn their loyalty. How you hurt women because you can't handle anyone who might challenge you. How you need 30 men at your back because you're too much of a coward to fight your own battles. Voss's face went purple. Big talk from a man with no gun. Don't need a gun to take you apart. The rage in Voss's eyes turned to something darker. He released Daniel with a shove, sent the boy stumbling toward Emma. You want to die like a hero, fine. But first, I'm going to make sure you watch everyone you've protected suffer. Starting with that pretty little wife of yours." He raised his hand, and 5 of his men started toward the house. That's when Lydia saw it, the exact moment Rhett's control shattered completely. He moved like lightning, closing the distance to Voss before anyone could react. Grabbed the man's gun hand, twisted it until bones cracked, and used the man's own momentum to haul him off the horse. They hit the ground hard, and then Rhett was on him, fists flying with surgical precision. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Rhett's men opening up on Voss's crew. Voss's men returning fire. Chaos exploding across the yard. But Rhett didn't stop. Didn't even pause. Just kept hitting Voss with methodical, terrifying efficiency. Lydia ran. Didn't think, just moved, racing down the stairs and out the door toward the fighting. She heard May screaming her name, heard someone shouting at her to get down, but all she could see was Rhett covered in blood, his knuckles split open. His eyes completely empty of everything except rage. One of Voss's men appeared in front of her, gun raised. Lydia lifted her own pistol and fired without thinking. The man went down. She kept running. She made it to Rhett just as he wrapped his hands around Voss's throat. The man's face was already a ruined mess, blood pouring from his nose and mouth, but Rhett wasn't stopping. Was going to kill him. Was going to squeeze until there was nothing left. "Rhett!" Lydia grabbed his arm. "Rhett, stop! You're going to kill him." "That's the idea." "No." She pulled harder, putting her whole body into it. "Not like this. Not where it makes you just like him." For a moment, nothing changed. Rhett's hands stayed locked around Voss's throat, his whole body vibrating with barely contained violence. Then his eyes found hers, and she saw the war happening inside him. The need for vengeance versus the desperate desire to be something better. Slowly, so slowly, his hands loosened. Voss sucked in a wheezing breath, coughing blood. Rhett stood, pulled Lydia behind him as Frank and the others closed in, weapons trained on what was left of Voss's men. Most had scattered. The ones who remained threw down their guns and raised their hands. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because Voss, bleeding and broken on the ground, managed to pull a hidden knife from his boot. Lunged upward at Rhett with the last of his strength. Lydia moved without thinking. Shoved Rhett aside, felt white-hot pain slice across her ribs as the knife found flesh instead of its intended target. She hit the ground hard, the world tilting sideways. Heard Rhett roar her name, heard gunfire final decisive, then felt his hands on her face, her shoulders frantically checking the wound. "Lydia, Lydia, look at me. Stay with me." "I'm fine," she managed. "It's not deep." But Rhett wasn't listening. He'd gone very still, his eyes locked on the blood seeping through her dress. When he looked up, his face was completely white. "You shouldn't have. Why did you—" His voice broke. "You could have died." "So could you." "That's different." "No, it's not." She caught his hand, held it against her cheek despite the blood. "You don't get to decide your life matters less than mine. You don't get to throw yourself away like you're worth nothing." Rhett's breathing was ragged, his hands shaking as they pressed against her wound to stop the bleeding. "I can't lose you. I can't." He stopped, seemed to realize what he was saying. "I just got you. I can't lose you already." Lydia's vision was starting to blur, but she forced herself to focus on his face. Saw tears tracking through the blood and dirt. Saw fear so raw it made her chest ache. "Then don't push me away anymore," she whispered. "Stop trying to protect me from yourself. Stop acting like caring about people makes you weak." Her fingers tightened on his. "I see you, Rhett. All of you. The violence and the pain and the terrible things you've had to do. And I'm still here. I'm still choosing to stay." Something in him broke then. She could see it happen, could see years of walls and defenses crumbling all at once. He pulled her up into his arms carefully, like she might shatter, and held her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. "You're a fool," he said against her hair, "choosing someone like me." "Maybe, but I'd rather be a fool who chose you than smart and alone." Frank appeared above them. "We need to get her inside. That wound needs cleaning before." "I know." But Rhett didn't let go. Not yet. just held her for one more moment, like he was memorizing the feeling of her still breathing, still alive. Then he stood lifting her like she weighed nothing and carried her toward the house. Behind them, the ranch lay in ruins, broken windows, bullet holes, bodies of Voss's men being dragged away. But as Lydia looked up at Rhett's face, she saw something new there. Not just pain, not just fear. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. And she knew with absolute certainty that something fundamental had changed between them. The war was over, both the one with Voss and the one Rhett had been fighting inside himself. What came next would be harder in different ways, but at least they'd face it together. Together started with Rhett refusing to leave her side for 3 days straight. May cleaned and bandaged the knife wound while Rhett sat beside the bed, his hand wrapped around Lydia's like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. The cut wasn't as bad as it had looked painful, but clean, already starting to heal. But every time Lydia so much as winced, Rhett's face went white and his grip tightened. "You need to rest," May told him on the second day. "You haven't slept since the attack." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running on fury and fear, and that only lasts so long before you collapse." May's voice softened. "She's going to be all right. The wound is healing clean, but she needs you healthy, not half dead from exhaustion." Rhett didn't answer, just sat there staring at Lydia's face like he was memorizing every detail. Lydia squeezed his hand. "She's right. You look terrible." "I've looked worse. That's not the compliment you think it is." She tried to smile, but pain flared across her ribs and she gasped. Immediately, Rhett was on his feet, hovering. "What's wrong? Is it bleeding again? Should I get—" "I'm fine. Just moved wrong." She caught his wrist, pulled him back down. "Rhett, I'm not dying. You can breathe." But he couldn't. She could see it in every line of his body, the way he held himself like he was bracing for her to be torn away at any moment. This wasn't just fear about the wound. This was something deeper, older. Something that had been building since the moment she'd stepped between him and that knife. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "About what?" "About why you're acting like I'm made of glass." His jaw worked. "You took a knife meant for me." "Yes." "You could have died, but I didn't." "You could have." His voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what that would have—" He stopped, pulled his hand free, stood and paced to the window. "I've lost people before, people I cared about, people I was supposed to protect, and every single time I told myself it was my fault. That if I'd been faster, smarter, stronger, they'd still be alive." "Rhett. And then you show up. This woman I barely know who I married to, saved from something worse who should hate me for dragging her into this mess. And instead, you—" His hands fisted against the windowsill. "You chose to stay. Chose to stand with me. Chose to take a knife meant for me because you thought my life was worth saving." Lydia pushed herself up, carefully ignoring the pull in her ribs. "It is worth saving." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. I've seen you remember, seen what you do for people, how you protect them, give them choices, treat them like they matter." She swung her legs over the side of the bed. "You're not responsible for every bad thing that's ever happened. You're not God. You're just a man trying to do right by people who've been hurt." He turned, and the pain in his eyes was staggering. "What if trying isn't enough? What if I can't keep you safe? Then I'll keep myself safe. And when that's not enough, I'll trust you to help. But Rhett—" She met his gaze. "You can't protect me from everything, and you can't punish yourself every time something goes wrong. How am I supposed to just accept that? By letting me make my own choices. By trusting that when I chose to step in front of that knife, it wasn't because I'm weak or stupid. It's because I care about you." The words hung in the air between them. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Rhett's expression broke. He crossed to her in 3 strides, dropped to his knees in front of where she sat, and pressed his forehead against her hands. "I don't know how to do this," he said roughly. Don't know how to let someone in. Every time I've tried, it's ended badly. So we'll figure it out together, make mistakes together, learn together. Lydia touched his hair, felt him shudder. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking you to let me stay. He lifted his head, and she saw tears tracking down his face. What if I hurt you? What if you don't? The question seemed to stun him, like he'd never considered that possibility before, that maybe, just maybe, he could be close to someone without destroying them. May cleared her throat from the doorway. There's people downstairs who want to see you both. When you're ready. Rhett wiped his face, stood. Give us a few minutes. After May left, he helped Lydia to her feet, steadied her when she swayed. You shouldn't be walking yet. I'm not staying in bed while people need to know we're all right. She leaned on him, felt his arm come around her waist, careful, protective, but also something else. Possessive, maybe. Like he was finally allowing himself to hold on instead of pushing away. They made it downstairs slowly. Found the main room packed with people, Frank, Daniel, Emma, and Sarah Rosa. The old man with the limp, the woman with bruises that were finally fading to yellow. Every person Rhett had saved, standing together, waiting. Emma spoke first. We wanted to thank you, both of you, for what you did. You don't need to thank us, Rhett said. Yes, we do. Emma's voice was firm. You could have given us up, could have saved yourself. But you didn't. You fought for us. Nearly died for us. She looked at Lydia. Both of you did. And we wanted you to know, Daniel added, his young voice stronger than it had been weeks ago, that we're staying. All of us. We're going to help rebuild, help defend this place, because it's not just your ranch anymore, it's ours too. Rhett's throat worked. You don't owe me. It's not about owing, Frank interrupted. It's about choosing. Same way you chose to protect us, we're choosing to stand with you. He gestured to the others. All of us. Lydia felt Rhett's arm tighten around her waist. Felt the way he was struggling to hold himself together. This man who'd spent his whole life alone, convinced he had to fight every battle by himself, was finally seeing what she'd tried to tell him. That the people he'd saved weren't just grateful, they were loyal. We're family. Then we've got work to do, Rhett said, finally, his voice rough. Ranch needs repairs. Fences need mending. We lost livestock in the attack that needs to be accounted for. He paused. And we need to make sure nothing like this happens again. Which means better defenses, more preparation, and everyone knowing how to protect themselves. We'll handle it, Frank said. You just focus on healing up, both of you. Over the next week, Lydia watched the ranch transform. Watched people who'd arrived broken and scared start working with purpose, with pride. Daniel took charge of the stables, organized a rotation for feeding and exercising the horses. Emma and Rosa expanded the kitchen, started teaching Sarah how to cook. The old man whose name Lydia finally learned was Henry turned out to be a master carpenter and began reinforcing the doors and windows. And Rhett watched it all with something that looked like wonder. Like he couldn't quite believe this was real, that these people actually wanted to stay. Wanted to build something with him, instead of just taking his protection and running. But he was still holding back. Still keeping that final distance between them, sleeping in his study, taking his meals alone when he could. And Lydia knew why. He was giving her the choice he'd promised. The freedom to decide whether she wanted this life, this man, or whether she'd rather take the money he'd offered and start over somewhere else. The question came on the 8th day, when the wound in her side had healed enough that she could move without pain. She found Rhett in his study papers, spread across his desk, a bottle of whiskey open at his elbow. You've been avoiding me, she said. He didn't look up. Been busy. No, you've been scared. She closed the door behind her. Scared that if you get too close, I'll realize what a mistake this was and leave. Finally, he met her eyes. Would it be a mistake? I don't know. You won't let me close enough to find out. Rhett set down his pen. The attack is over. Voss is dead, his men scattered. You're safe now. Safer than you've ever been. He pulled open a drawer, took out a thick envelope. There's enough money in here to get you anywhere you want to go. New territory, new name, new life. No one would blame you for taking it. Lydia stared at the envelope. Is that what you want? For me to leave? I want you to have a choice. A real one, not one forced on you by your father's debts or my need to save people. His voice was steady, but she could see his hands shaking. I want you to choose your own life. And if I choose to stay, something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or fear. Then you're choosing this, all of it. A man with blood on his hands and ghosts in his head. A ranch that will always attract trouble because I can't stop helping people who need it. A life that will never be easy or simple or safe. Sounds terrible, Lydia said. Then she walked to his desk, picked up the envelope and tore it in half. Rhett's breath caught. What are you? I'm choosing. She dropped the pieces on his desk. I'm choosing you. Not because I'm grateful, not because I'm scared to be alone, not because I think I can fix you. She moved around the desk, stood in front of him. I'm choosing you because in 3 weeks, you've shown me more respect, more freedom, more genuine care than anyone else in my entire life. Because you gave me a locked door and a loaded gun and the right to say no. Because you're willing to tear yourself apart trying to protect people you barely know. Lydia. I'm choosing you because when I look at you, I don't see a monster. I see a man who survived something terrible and decided to use that pain to help others instead of hurt them. I see someone who's been alone too long and doesn't know how to let people in, but is trying anyway. Her voice cracked. And I'm choosing you because when that knife came at you, the only thing I could think was that the world needs you in it. That I need you in it. Rhett stood so fast his chair fell over. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I love you, Rhett Calder. I love your stubborn need to save everyone. I love how careful you are with broken things. I love that you gave me a choice, even when it terrified you that I might choose to leave. She took his face in her hands. And I love that underneath all that violence and pain, you're just someone who wants to be seen as something other than dangerous. I am dangerous. I know. But you're also kind, protective, loyal to a fault, and you're mine if you want to be. She held his gaze. Do you want to be? The question hung between them. Rhett's hands came up to cover hers, and she could feel him trembling. I don't know how to be what you need, he said hoarsely. You already are. You just have to stop pushing me away. What if I fail? What if I can't? Then we fail together. But Rhett, she stepped closer. You've spent your whole life preparing for the worst. Maybe it's time to hope for something better. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Then he was kissing her, desperate and tender, and full of years of loneliness, finally breaking open. Lydia kissed him back, tasted salt from tears she wasn't sure were his or hers. Felt his arms come around her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission to hold on. When they finally broke apart, Rhett pressed his forehead to hers. I don't deserve you. Good thing it's not about deserving, it's about choosing. She smiled. And I choose you, every day, for as long as you'll have me. Forever, he said without hesitation. If you're offering forever, I'll take it. Then it's yours. They stood there for a long time just holding each other, and Lydia felt something settle in her chest. This was right. This was home. Not the ranch or the room with the locked door him. This complicated, damaged, beautiful man who'd saved her in more ways than she could count. The next morning, Rhett took her to the locked room. Are you sure? She asked as he pulled out the key. If we're doing this, if you're really staying, you need to see everything. His hand shook slightly on the key. Need to know what you're choosing. The door swung open. Inside was sparse a bed, a desk shelves lined with journals. Nothing frightening, nothing monstrous. I don't understand, Lydia said. Rhett picked up one of the journals, handed it to her. Read. She opened it carefully. Found page after page of names, dates, details written in Rhett's precise handwriting. The man who'd bought him when he was 12. The overseer who'd beaten him, the men he'd killed to escape, every person he'd hurt, every line he'd crossed, every piece of himself he'd destroyed to survive. "This is what I keep locked away," Rhett said quietly. "Not weapons or violence. Memory. Proof that I'm not the hero everyone thinks I am. That I've done things I can never take back, hurt people who maybe didn't deserve it, crossed lines that can't be uncrossed." Lydia set down the journal. "You were 12 years old and sold into slavery. You did what you had to do to survive. I killed a man when I was 15. Stabbed him 17 times because I was so angry I couldn't stop." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I burned down a building with people inside because they'd helped the man who owned me. I've tortured information out of people. He stopped. "I've done things that would make you run if you knew the details." "Then tell me the details." He stared at her. "What? You want me to know everything? Then tell me, all of it. Don't just give me the journal and hope I'll be horrified enough to leave." She sat on the bed. "Tell me what happened. Tell me who you had to become. And then let me decide if it changes anything." So he did. Sat beside her and talked for hours, his voice steady and cold, laying out every terrible thing he'd ever done. The violence, the rage, the moments when he'd been more animal than human. And Lydia listened, didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just sat there holding his hand while he dismantled himself piece by piece in front of her. When he finally finished, the sun was setting. Rhett sat in silence, waiting for her judgment. "Thank you for telling me," Lydia said finally. "That's it. That's all you have to say." "What do you want me to say? That I'm horrified, disgusted?" She turned to face him. "I'm heartbroken. Heartbroken that a child was put in a position where he had to do those things to survive. Heartbroken that you've been carrying this guilt alone for so long. But disgusted, no. How can you not be? Because I see the whole picture. I see a boy who was sold and broken and forced to become something he never wanted to be. And I see the man he became despite that, someone who uses his strength to protect instead of destroy. Someone who gives people choices instead of taking them away." She squeezed his hand. "You think this room holds proof you're a monster. I think it holds proof you're human. Flawed and hurting, and doing the best you can with what you were given." Rhett's breathing hitched. "I don't know how you can look at me and not see—" "I see you?" Lydia interrupted. "All of you. The violence and the gentleness, the rage and the compassion, the man you were forced to become and the man you chose to be." She touched his face. "And I love all of it, even the parts you think make you unlovable." He broke then, completely, pulled her into his arms and sobbed against her shoulder while she held him, rocked him, whispered that he was safe now, that he didn't have to fight alone anymore, that she wasn't going anywhere. And when the tears finally stopped, when he lifted his head and looked at her with red-rimmed eyes, she saw something new there. Not hope or fear or pain. Peace. "I love you," he said. Simple, direct, like he'd been waiting years to say it and finally had permission. "I know," Lydia said. "I've known since you gave me that locked door, since you handed me a gun and taught me how to defend myself, since you carried me inside after the attack like you were carrying something precious." She smiled. "You just needed to know it yourself." Rhett kissed her, then soft and reverent, like she was something sacred instead of just a woman who'd chosen him. And Lydia kissed him back, tasted forgiveness and new beginnings, felt the last of the walls between them finally crumble. When they left that room, Rhett locked the door behind them. But his hand was steady this time, because the ghosts didn't own him anymore. They were just memories, just proof that he'd survived. And now, finally, he could start living. Living started with small things. Rhett moving his belongings from the study to the bedroom they now shared. Learning to reach for her in the night instead of pulling away. Letting her see him at his worst, exhausted, angry, broken, and trusting she wouldn't use it against him. It was terrifying and beautiful and harder than any fight he'd ever fought, but Lydia stayed patient, stayed steady, and gradually the walls came down. The ranch healed too. They rebuilt the damaged structures, reinforced the defenses, planted crops in fields that had been fallow. More people arrived. Word spread that Rhett Calder's ranch was a safe haven, a place where broken people could rebuild, and each time, Rhett would look at Lydia with that question in his eyes. "Can we handle one more?" And she'd always say yes. By the end of the first year, they had 30 permanent residents. By the second 50. The ranch became something bigger than either of them had imagined, not just a home, but a community. People who'd arrived with nothing now had purpose, pride, family. Daniel had grown into a confident young man who managed the stables with quiet competence. Emma had taken over the household management with May, the two women running things with efficiency that would have impressed a general. Even little Sarah, who'd arrived, terrified and silent, now laughed and played with the other children who'd found their way to safety. But it wasn't all easy. 6 months and a cattle buyer tried to cheat them on a sale. Rhett's hands had fisted that old violence rising to the surface, and Lydia had seen the exact moment he started to slip back into old patterns. She'd touched his arm, said his name once, and watched him make the choice to walk away instead of fight. They'd found a different buyer, gotten a fair price, and that night, Rhett had held her so tight she could barely breathe. "I almost lost it today," he'd said against her hair. "But you didn't. That's what matters. What if next time I can't stop myself? Then I'll be there to remind you who you are, who we are." She'd pulled back to look at him. "You're not that scared kid anymore, Rhett. You're a man with choices, and you're choosing to be better every single day." A year in, they faced their first real test. A group of men had ridden up claiming one of their residents, a woman named Clara, had stolen from them. They'd demanded she be handed over for punishment. Rhett had stood on the porch, Lydia beside him, and said, "She's under my protection. You want her, you go through me." The men had looked at each other, weighed their odds, and ridden away. Clara had cried, thanked them, asked how she could ever repay their kindness. "You already did," Lydia had told her. "You chose to survive. That's enough." After that, the challenges became different. Not about fighting off threats, but about building something that would last. They started a school for the children, taught them to read and write and defend themselves. They established trade relationships with neighboring ranches, proving they weren't just outlaws hiding in the wilderness, but legitimate business partners. They built a chapel, nothing fancy, just a simple structure where May led Sunday services and people could gather to celebrate marriages and mourn losses. And through it all, Rhett changed. Not overnight, not completely, but gradually. The hard edges softened. The constant vigilance eased. He learned to laugh, really laugh deep and genuine at Daniel's terrible jokes and Sarah's dramatic retellings of stories. He learned to ask for help instead of shouldering everything alone. He learned to believe that good things didn't have to end in tragedy. But the biggest change came 2 years in, when Lydia told him she was pregnant. She'd expected fear. Expected him to spiral into worry about everything that could go wrong. Instead, he'd gone very still, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her stomach like he was listening for proof this was real. "We're going to have a baby," he'd said, voice shaking. "Yes. A child. Our child. Are you all right?" He'd looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "I never thought, after everything I've done, I never thought I'd get to have this. Get to have you, a family, a life that's about more than just surviving." His hands had trembled against her. "I don't know how to be a father." "Neither do I. We'll figure it out together." She'd run her fingers through his hair. "Just like we've figured out everything else." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Lydia got sick in the mornings, exhausted in the afternoons, and Rhett hovered like a mother hen. He rearranged her entire schedule to make sure she rested, brought her endless cups of water read to her, from books she didn't even like, just to keep her entertained during bed rest. May teased him mercilessly about being overprotective, but Lydia understood. This was his way of fighting the fear by taking care of her so thoroughly there was no room for anything to go wrong. 7 months and complications started. The midwife warned them the baby was positioned wrong, that the birth would be difficult, possibly dangerous. Rhett had gone white as a sheet. "What can we do?" he'd demanded. There has to be something. We wait, the midwife had said, and we hope the baby turns before it's time. That night, Lydia had found Rhett in the locked room, the one they rarely entered anymore. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by those journals, reading through his own history like he was searching for answers. "What are you doing?" she'd asked, trying to remember. Remember what? How to survive the worst thing imaginable. He'd looked up at her with haunted eyes. "Because if something happens to you, if I lose you because of this, you won't." She'd sat beside him carefully. "I'm not going anywhere." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'm going to fight like hell to stay with you, with our baby, with this life we've built." She'd taken his hand. "And I can promise that even if something goes wrong, you're strong enough to handle it. You've survived worse." "Not this. I couldn't survive losing you." "Then don't think about losing me. Think about meeting our child. Think about teaching them to ride, to be brave, to choose kindness even when the world is cruel." She'd smiled through her own fear. "Think about the future we're building, not the past you've left behind." The baby turned 2 weeks before she was due. The midwife confirmed it with a smile, and Rhett had actually laughed, pure, unrestrained relief. When their daughter was born a month later, screaming and healthy and perfect, Lydia watched Rhett hold her for the first time and saw a transformation she'd never thought possible. All that violence, all that rage, all that carefully controlled danger, it melted away in the face of 8 pounds of furious infant. He held her like she was made of glass, tears streaming down his face, and whispered, "Hello, little one. I'm your father. And I promise I'm going to be better than mine ever was." They named her Rose after Lydia's mother, and from that moment on, everything shifted again. Rhett became the kind of father Lydia had only dreamed existed. Patient when Rose cried in the night. Gentle when she learned to walk and fell 100 times. Protective but not controlling, teaching her to be strong while also being soft. He'd carry her around the ranch on his shoulders, pointing out animals and teaching her their names. He'd read her stories every night, making up silly voices that made her giggle. He'd let her crawl all over him while he worked, interrupting important meetings to play games she invented on the spot. And the people on this ranch fell in love with her. Daniel made her a rocking horse. Emma sewed her dresses. May taught her to bake cookies that were more mess than success, but tasted like heaven anyway. Even the roughest, hardest men would stop what they were doing to wave at her, to smile when she called their names. But the moment that changed everything came when Rose was 3 years old. They'd gone into town, rare but necessary for supplies, and a man had recognized Rhett. Had called him by his old reputation, the feared cowboy who'd killed more men than anyone could count. Rose had been holding Rhett's hand, and she'd looked up at him with those huge, trusting eyes. "Papa? Why is that man scared of you?" Rhett had frozen. Every person in the street had gone quiet, waiting to see how the legend would respond. And Lydia had watched her husband, this man who'd once been a weapon, who'd survived horrors that would have broken lesser people, kneel down to his daughter's level. "Because I used to do bad things," he'd said simply. "A long time ago, before you were born, I hurt people who hurt others. And some people remember that and think I'm still the same person." "Are you?" "No." He'd touched her cheek. "Your mama taught me how to be different. How to protect people without being cruel. How to be strong without being scary." He'd smiled. "And you teach me every day that I can be gentle and still be brave." "I think you're the bravest person in the world," Rose had declared. Then she'd hugged him, and Rhett had held her while half the town watched, and Lydia had seen the exact moment his old reputation died and a new one was born. After that, things changed in ways they hadn't expected. Other ranchers started bringing their problems to Rhett, not because they feared him, but because they respected him. Disputes over land or water or livestock that might have ended in violence were settled with Rhett mediating, finding solutions that worked for everyone. He became known not as the most dangerous man in the territory, but as the fairest, the most reliable, the one who'd help anyone who needed it, no questions asked. The ranch grew. 5 years after their wedding, they had 70 permanent residents and another 20 who came and went seasonally. They'd built 3 new bunkhouses, expanded the kitchen, added a proper schoolhouse. They'd started hosting gathering celebrations where other ranches would come, where people could trade and talk and remember they weren't alone in the wilderness. And through it all, Lydia watched Rhett continue to transform. Watched him learn to sleep without nightmares. Watched him smile more often than he frowned. Watched him teach Rose to ride, to shoot, to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard. "You did this," he'd told her one night, years after they'd first married. They were sitting on the porch, Rose asleep upstairs, the ranch quiet under the stars. "Everything good in my life, you made it possible." "No," Lydia had said. "You did this. You chose to let me in. Chose to believe you deserved good things. Chose to build instead of destroy. I never would have made those choices without you. Maybe, but you're the one who had to make them." She'd leaned against him. "I just loved you while you figured it out." Rhett had pulled her closer. "I spent so many years thinking I was dangerous, thinking I had to keep everyone at a distance to keep them safe. And then you showed up and refused to be kept away. Refused to see me as a monster even when I was trying to convince you I was one. Because you never were. You were just hurt and scared and trying to survive in a world that wanted to destroy you." "I love you," he'd said. "In case I haven't mentioned that recently. You mention it every day, in 100 different ways." She'd smiled. "Like how you always pour my coffee before yours. How you make sure I have the warmest blanket in winter. How you look at me like I hung the moon, even when I'm covered in dirt from the garden." You did hang the moon. Far as I'm concerned. They'd sat in comfortable silence after that, and Lydia had thought about the journey they'd taken. From a forced marriage, to save her from a worse fate, to a partnership built on trust and respect, to a love so deep it had transformed both of them. She thought about the girl she'd been scared, grateful just to survive, unsure what she was worth. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong, confident, building a life she'd never imagined was possible. But most of all, she thought about Rhett. About the man everyone had feared, who'd turned out to be the gentlest soul she'd ever known. Who'd been broken by cruelty and had chosen to respond with kindness. Who'd been labeled dangerous and had proven that the most dangerous thing about him was how fiercely he loved the people he protected. 10 years after their wedding, the ranch hosted the biggest gathering yet. People came from 3 territories away to celebrate not just their anniversary, but everything the ranch had become. A place of healing, of second chances, of proof that broken people could build something beautiful if they were given the space and support to do it. Rose was 11 now, growing tall and fierce like her father, but with her mother's compassion. She helped organize the celebration, made sure everyone had enough food, led the younger children in games. And when the sun started to set and someone asked Rhett to say a few words, he'd stood with Lydia beside him and Rose in front of them, and had looked at all the people they'd gathered. "I'm not good at speeches," he'd started, and people had laughed because it was true. "But I want you all to know something. This place, what we've built here, it's not mine. It belongs to every person who showed up broken and chose to heal. To everyone who was told they were worthless and proved them wrong. To everyone who survived something they shouldn't have and decided to help others survive too." He'd paused, his hand finding Lydia's. "I used to think strength meant never showing weakness, never letting anyone in, never admitting I needed help. But the strongest thing I ever did was let this woman love me, was let you all become family, was learn that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. We've all got scars here," he'd continued. "We've all got things in our past we wish we could change, but we can't change the past. All we can do is choose who we want to be now, choose to be better, choose to help instead of hurt, choose to build instead of destroy." Rose had reached up and taken his other hand, and Rhett had smiled down at her. "And sometimes, if we're really lucky, we get to raise children who never have to learn the hard lessons we did, who grow up knowing they're loved and valued and safe. That's the real victory, not surviving, thriving, not just protecting ourselves, creating a world where others can be protected too." The crowd had erupted in applause, and Lydia had felt tears streaming down her face. Because this was it. This was the life they'd built from ashes and pain and stubborn hope. This was proof that people could change, could heal, could become more than their worst moments. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lydia and Rhett stood together looking at the ranch they'd created, at the buildings they'd raised, at the gardens they'd planted, at the evidence of hundreds of lives touched and changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asked. "Taking that deal with my father, marrying a stranger to save her from something worse?" Rhett pulled her close. "Every single day." Her heart stuttered. "What?" "I regret that it took me so long to realize what I had. That I wasted time being scared when I could have been loving you. That I almost pushed you away because I was too much of a coward to believe I deserved happiness." He turned her to face him. "But do I regret marrying you? Never. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Rose and this life we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed was possible." "We built it together," Lydia reminded him. "Every piece of it." "Yeah." He kissed her forehead. "We did." They stood there holding each other under the stars, and Lydia thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The fear and pain and violence. The courage and hope and love. The journey from strangers to partners to soulmates who'd survived the worst and built the best. And she knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because fate had decided it. Not because she'd had no other choice. But because every day she and Rhett chose each other. Chose this life. Chose to keep building something beautiful from the broken pieces they'd both carried. The world had called Rhett Calder the most feared cowboy in the territory. Had labeled him dangerous, violent, someone to avoid. And they'd been right about the danger, just wrong about what made him dangerous. It wasn't his capacity for violence. It wasn't his ruthlessness or his skill with a gun. It was his capacity to love so fiercely that he'd risk everything to protect it. To care so deeply that he'd burn down the world before he'd let anyone hurt the people he'd claimed as family. To transform pain into purpose and use everything he'd survived to make sure others didn't have to survive alone. And Lydia. She'd been sold like property, forced into a marriage that should have been her prison. But instead, she'd found her freedom. Not in running away or starting over somewhere else, but in choosing to stay with a man everyone said was a monster and discovering he was just human. Beautifully, terrifyingly, perfectly human. And in loving him and letting him love her back, she'd found the strength she'd never known she possessed. Together, they'd proven that the strongest love stories aren't the ones that start with romance and ease. They're the ones built in the space between survival and hope. The ones where two broken people decide to heal each other instead of break each other further. The ones where freedom isn't given, it's chosen every single day in 1,000 small ways that add up to forever. Because at the end of everything, the truth was this. No one had ever looked into Rhett Calder's eyes and stayed long enough to understand them until Lydia had, and in staying, in choosing and loving, she'd given him something he'd never thought he could have. She'd given him a life worth living. And he'd given her the same. That was the real story. Not about a feared cowboy and the woman forced to marry him, but about two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to build something bright enough to light the way for everyone who came after. And that choice, that daily, deliberate, courageous choice to love and be loved, made all the difference.